my ET contact, uh, who's also from same planet and also is a fragment of the same soul. His name is Ventura, and he actually has used a portal. There are 60 portals on Earth, which is more than probably any other planet in the universe. And one of these portals actually goes to that next universe over. And he's actually visited that universe. And he says, Tom, because because the human race hasn't started traveling to the stars, he said, you can't tell the difference, between one galaxy and the next. There were souls that were attracted to this creator's universe. Tons and tons of souls. Souls, there are souls that ensoul every single sun, every single moon, every single planet in this creation. They were all attracted here when the Creator created this universe. So, for Earth, um, Creator had this plan from obviously long ago. Um, Now, Gaia is the is the soul that ensouls Earth. Gaia was attracted to this creation 25 billion years ago. The upper frequencies have easier lives than do the lower frequencies. And and the upper frequency, the 12th frequency, is non-physical, and all the other lives that each one of us has, because there are 12 parallel U's, 12 parallel Michaels, okay, from the upper timelines down to the lower, we're on timeline 6. And so typically the inventions and great ideas and everything start on the upper timelines and they work their way down to our timeline 6. That to end the war, because the war wasn't going good for this group of planets that eventually became the Federation of Planets, consisting of 20,000 planets now. But the war wasn't going good. The reptilians had more ships, and it was terrible fighting. I mean, uh, they would use a portal, show up in somebody's at somebody's planet or sun, and they wouldn't destroy just a planet like in the in the Star Wars movies. They would destroy the sun and all the planets orbiting that sun and killing billions of people. So I mean, this was a terrible, terrible war, and both sides did that. So, but it wasn't going very good, and so I was given the idea to pass along. Um, why not offer them to take part in the Earth experiment? And they were so hated for this war that had been going on thousands of
The
years.
reptilians were
Yeah,
hated.
the people fighting the reptilians. Okay, they were they so hated the reptilians that they rejected the idea. So it took another 450 universal years for them to finally say, and things were going even worse by then, to finally say, okay, we'll suggest it, thinking they wouldn't accept, but they did. And so that ended the Star Wars. They signed a peace agreement. They call this the Great War. They don't call it the Reptilian War, which is what I called it in the book. Humans, all the way even to Atlantis, had problems with the dinosaurs. They actually had a big meeting somewhere between the Atlanteans and and I think some of the Europeans about how to get rid of these dinosaurs, because they were still a problem when all the way down when humans were introduced 60,000 years ago. If you can imagine, hundreds of years for the mud to finally sink from this whole continent, and it killed millions of people. Not only it killed millions of people in Atlantis, but because of the continent sinking, the oceans of the world raised 162 feet.
Forbidden.
Welcome to Beyond the Forbidden. Today on the show, I got Tom Moore. You can go to his website, which is thegentleway.com. I believe that's the correct website address. Thegentlewaybook.com. I got it right here. Thegentlewaybook.com. It's going to be right below in the description, and it's also going to be in the video. So just go to thegentlewaybook.com. But Tom Moore, thank you for coming on Beyond the Forbidden. How you doing, man?
Great. Thanks for having me. And hello to all your fans out there.
Yes, and a lot of my members are going to like this, and also Facebook followers. That's my biggest audience is on my Facebook page. We're pushing that 250,000 followers. I don't mean to boast and brag, but it's an anomaly. That's fantastic. I've dedicated a lot of years to try to get information to reach out to people, and some people say it's boasting or bragging, but I don't look at it that way. I look at it, I'm proud of, because it's a lot of work. I don't do this for a living, but I do put in about 20 to 30 hours on top of my 40 to 50 hour job, regular job a week. I at least put in 20. It could vary. Put in sometimes maybe 30 hours, outside of my actual job. But yeah, I'm excited to get in some of your books. So your Atlantis and Lemuria book, we're going to be talking about First Contact, and also the Earth Experiment. Is that one of your books? Because I could not find that one. I do have your Atlantis and Lemuria book, but I could not find the Earth Experiment.
The Earth Experiment is like why we're here. Okay, it's the creator of our universe, and here we get immediately into some things that there are people. We're all kind of wandering around because we're veiled. Our souls agreed to be veiled for the Earth Experiment. The creator of this universe wanted to see if the four negative energies that are there, but he and the trillions of other creators who have created trillions of universes had never been able to work with. All our universe and all the other universes were created in the 10 positive energies. So this negative energy, these four negative energies, had never been able to be worked with. So our souls volunteered to be part of the Earth Experiment, and our souls had to have achieved a high enough vibrational level that they were allowed to take part. So not everybody could take part in this. It had to be people that were like we're like Johnny on the go kind of souls. Our souls wanted to go to a higher level of vibration, and so we volunteered. Each of our souls, we're a fragment of a soul, so each of our souls has anywhere from 6 to 12 fragments of itself, having 600 to 800 lives on average on Earth, and at the same time they may be having 500,000 to over 1 million lives all over the universe for their learning. They because the end game is in several million years, our souls are all going to merge, and we're going to become a creator, which has never ever happened in any universe. So that's what we've been promised for far in the future, when we raise our vibrational levels to the point where we can all merge together. So it's a little complicated, but we've been promised to fast track our vibrational levels, and that's what we're doing by having these lives where we're veiled from knowing that all of us came from other planets. I've been told that I've had over 100,000 lives uh,
Damn.
before on a water planet in the uh, Sirius B star system, and uh, so that's where I came from. I was an amphibian, so everybody had really different looks from whatever planet you originated from.
And we may get into more of that. And thanks for that
Okay.
description of that, Tom.
Okay.
But you emailed me, said maybe we need to go back to the beginning.
Okay.
And I agree. And we're going to touch on all three of those that I just mentioned. We're going,
Okay.
of course, Atlantis, Lemuria, um, First Contact,
Yeah.
and we're going to go more into Earth Experiment. But I'm not sure. You emailed me that published a video on, uploaded a video on Facebook. It's not necessarily that I believe in it, but I thought it was interesting. It went back. I think it was oh man, I forgot his name. I just drew a brain fart. But it went back something, maybe I'll pull up here in a minute, but how far back the civilization goes, whatever, how far does our origins go back? So
Okay.
where would you like to start, Tom? Because this is kind of a vast reach, because you could look at how far back our civilization goes here on Earth,
Hmm.
or you can say how far back, what's the actual origin of us, like out in the stars, and then we got seated here on Earth.
Right.
So I'm going to let you, because you've been doing this for a while. So where would you like to start? Would you like to start out in the stars and then make our way here? Or
Okay. And I'm going to give you um, how long this universe uh, has existed. Okay. And and um, then we'll kind of go from there. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that are going to pop up uh, from the James Webb uh, telescope that's out there now. There are
mm-hmm.
going to be at least three things that are going to come up that are going to be kind of big revelations. Okay, first of all, the creator of this universe, I call it the Little Bang theory instead of the Big Bang. Okay, because when creator took millions of years going to other universes to get ideas for his universe. And when he decided to do this universe, it was 25 billion years ago, and yet our astronomers have only estimated it at 13.5 billion years. Okay, one of the things, excuse me, that the James Webb telescope is going to discover. And I actually saw this about 2 or 3 months ago. There was a story in some science or astronomy magazine online that said, "Oh, look at this little image. That's a galaxy. It's really, really far away." And so they, it's not going to be announced for probably anywhere from 2 to 5 years, but eventually they're going to say, "Hey, the universe isn't just 13.5, it's 20 billion years old." Okay.
Mm.
So they're going to get closer, but they said, I've been told that we don't have the instruments yet to be able to see that far back to the creation of this universe. So when it was created, creator started with just a few hundred galaxies, which sounds like a lot,
Yeah.
but just started with a few hundred galaxies. And after uh, you know checking on them, they were all very compacted together, very closely compacted. And after a creator saw that, yeah, this is looking working good, then he started creating thousands of more galaxies. Now, what's amazing, and obviously it will, some astronomer will have to prove this right someday, is that every single one of those trillions of galaxies in this universe are different from each other. I mean, that's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Look, in my newsletter, I compared like the Sombrero galaxy to the Milky Way. Okay, our Milky Way galaxy is is supposed to be in the middle of the universe. It's not. It's at the very edge of our universe, and in our night sky. And this is something else the James Webb Telescope will discover one of these days in the next 5 or 10 years. Excuse me, is that some of these galaxies that we think are in our universe are actually in a universe that is adjacent to ours. And I think I've been told, and keep in mind I'm not an astronomer, so don't hold me too close on this. But if you look towards sort of like the Sagittarius constellations and all, if when they start looking at some of those galaxies, they will find that they're totally different from any of the galaxies in our universe. So that's something else that the James Webb is going to discover. There's a third thing. The James Webb Telescope will find that there is a void millions of miles in width that runs between these two universes. So there's that universe, there's two other universes on the other side of our universe, but we can't see them because they're just too far away and we don't have the instruments to see them. So there's three universes adjacent to ours, and that's something for our astronomers, and as they get better equipment and all that, they'll be able to discover in the upcoming years.
Do you think all these different universes, do you think that they're all different? Well, I mean, like completely different. Or do you think that each universe is a copy, a parallel to this universe that we're living in now? I know that's a speculation, but tell me, what do you think?
Okay. Are you talking about the next universe over?
Yes. All the other universes.
Oh, all the other universes. I was told, okay, first of all, it even goes way farther back. There is a creator of creators. I call her Big Mama. Okay. She has created these trillions and trillions of creators, and every single one of them has a different interest than all the others, which is beyond our understanding, way beyond our understanding. And our creator was created sort of like in the middle of the pack. But I've told some universes are as small as the head of a pin, and others are larger than our universe. So there's just a tremendous variety of these universes. Eventually, when we get in talking about first contact conversations with an ET, my ET contact, who's also from same planet and also is a fragment of the same soul, his name is Ventura, and he actually has used a portal. There are 60 portals on Earth, which is more than probably any other planet in the universe. And one of these portals actually goes to that next universe over. And he's actually visited that universe. And he says, Tom, because the human race hasn't started traveling to the stars, he said, you can't tell the difference, between one galaxy and the next. But he said, I can tell you that universe is tremendously different from our universe. So,
wow. So I guess because there's so much to try to unpack and unravel here. Mm-hmm. And, we'll get you back on down the road too. And like I said before, try to get you also in person, face to face, because you're just a hop, skip, and a jump, from me. So, so where is Earth? Is Earth like with life on Earth? Is Earth like I guess, are we all mutts? Like, are we all just a swamp full of different beings that came from out in the stars? or do we all have one source? And how far back are we going? Did you say, I think in your book, you mentioned, if I'm wrong, 10.5 million years ago, maybe, but that was with a question mark. So how far back does life on Earth go? And where do we get seated out in the cosmos?
Sure. Okay. A little bit of a story, but quickly.
I'm always here, Tom. So, you take as much time as you want, man.
Okay. When when Creator created this universe, it Creator automatically there were souls that were attracted to this Creator's universe. Tons and tons of souls. There are souls that ensoul every single sun, every single moon, every single planet in this creation. They were all attracted here when the Creator created this universe. So for Earth, Creator had this plan from obviously long ago. Now, Gaia is the soul that ensouls Earth. Gaia was attracted to this creation 25 billion years ago. And Creator understood that Gaia had a desire to become what's called a quantum master. Okay. And so Creator told Gaia, well, if you want to do that, you need to visit every single one of the universes I've created so far and understand why the souls that inhabit these suns and moons and planets were attracted to that particular galaxy. And so for millions of years, the soul of Gaia visited every single one of the galaxies that had been created at that time. And I said, well, and a Creator said, I want you to ensoul this asteroid. And so the asteroid was 2 miles wide. And so Gaia ensouled that asteroid and was able to move from galaxy to galaxy, planet to planet, sun to sun, whatever, using what's called portal hopping. And we can get into portal hopping more, but portal hopping, there are these 60 portals on Earth, but most planets and suns only have maybe one. And so in order to get from one part of this universe to the other part, these ETs have to do what's called portal hopping because there are energetic pathways between these galaxies, between these suns and moons and what have you. So Gaia used these portals just like the ETs do today. So I'm told, well, the comparison I was given was, imagine a Southwest airline plane starting in Florida and going across the United States, hopping from place to place all the way to California. And when I acted surprised at that analogy, I was told, "Oh, Tom, we know everything about you." So that was the analogy. That's what portal hopping. So that's how they get from one part of the universe to the other. Whether it's called a wormhole or whatever, they're called portals. And as an example, for any of your viewers that have seen Skinwalker Ranch series, there's a portal right there at Skinwalker Ranch. There's also another portal in Colorado. There's 7 portals here in the United States out of the 60.
Wow. So also in your Atlantis and Lemuria, Lost Continents Revealed book, the Human Origins chapter. So it goes on to, let me see, is this a conversation? Who is Theo and Gaia?
Okay. Gaia is the soul that inhabits the earth, there are actually, and Gaia had to become a quantum master because there are actually 12 parallel Earths, all at different frequencies. And it was designed that way so that the upper frequencies have easier lives than do the lower frequencies. And the upper frequency, the 12th frequency, is non-physical, and all the other lives that each one of us has, because there are 12 parallel U's, 12 parallel Michaels, okay, from the upper timelines down to the lower, we're on timeline 6. And so typically the inventions and great ideas and everything start on the upper timelines and they work their way down to our timeline 6. And then lives get increasingly harder down in the lower timelines. So on timeline 1 and 2, I died of a heart attack. So I'm no longer there. So each life is different from the others.
So within that chapter, you just gave a little bit of groundwork. Goes on to say, were the thought forms described by Edgar Cayce in his writings about Atlantis in the shape of humans, orbs, or what? And I'm not sure who's replying here. Yes, thought forms had a variety of shapes, as you can imagine, because they were just that thoughts. They were not physical yet. So there was no need to be a certain shape. Although as they grew closer to being physical, they took on a completely humanoid form. In the early stages, they probably looked closer to the shape of an orb. But again, as they took on that thought forms of humans, their images grew closer and closer to that of a human being. And a page over, okay, then on the second page, okay, then please help me understand the seeming contradiction when Edgar Cayce said that on the continent of Atlantis, there were humans who were barely physical. Yes, this is a little difficult to understand. Humans had been physical for millions of years, but new souls in their first Earth lives were still permitted at the time to experience physicality without being birthed. This was so they could get their toes wet. To use your vernacular, it was to give them a feel for what an Earth life would be like without all the dangers. I need my glasses, but I'm reading it off the Kindle on my phone. So explain a little bit about that. So we weren't.
Keep in mind there are different versions of humans. In actuality,
I wanted to bring that up, not to interject. I want to bring that up because that was very intriguing, and I was like, man, I got to ask Tom about that. So
so the we were constructed by ETs. All right, Creator sent emissaries to these extraterrestrial planets, very advanced, and Creator said, I want you to create humans. And they had the knowledge, but not the practical knowledge of how to do it. So they went through all sorts of experimentation, which is why I think I was told there are like 67 or something, 65 or 67 bodies that they went through. A number of them have not yet been discovered. So yes, our souls wanted to get a little feel for the earth and these 4 negative energies. So they were sort of allowed to be sort of non-physical, but eventually they had to take on a physical form. I was told that we could embody or ensoul an animal of some type as in order to get our feet wet. I chose a panther for my first life on Earth in a jungle, because my first life on Earth was going to be in a jungle, which I understand didn't last very long. I was eaten by some wild animal or something. And what's interesting, a lot of a lot of first lives on Earth were as horses. And so I said, well, did any of them win races? And I was told no, most of them would have been like the fifth or sixth horse back, in a horse race if they were race horses.
I
So
I would have liked to have been like a T-Rex or something like
yeah,
that.
right. So and that was one of the problems. Humans all the way even to Atlantis had problems with the dinosaurs. They actually had a big meeting somewhere between the Atlanteans and I think some of the Europeans about how to get rid of these dinosaurs because they were still a problem when all the way down when humans were introduced 60,000 years ago.
Is
We
that
went
when Atlantis was was around? Was it 60 or 50,000 years ago? Or
well, Atlantis was a continent, so it was around, for millennia before, and
how far back was, not to interject, but you're just throwing a lot of things and I'm just trying to grasp some of it. So the dinosaurs were still around during the time of Atlantis.
yeah,
What stage of
but
Atlantis were they
not
still around?
on. What's interesting, not on Lemuria. They didn't have any dinosaurs to contend with. Only Atlantis and Europe mostly. So,
About what stage was that? Like within the year cycle?
okay, as I say, the dinosaurs were still around when the ETs finally settled on the Adam and Eve body. Okay, bodies, and that was 60,000 years ago. Before then, there were, as an example, the Neanderthals. They had 70% of human intelligence, but they were also cannibalistic. So there was never more than about 3.5 million of them. When it got to the point where there was the Cro-Magnons, there was 5 million of them. They had the same intelligence that we do today, but they were still the ETs were still tweaking, and they got rid of the sort of the overhanging brow because in a fight, if it broke, it was almost like that was it. That was going to be the end because they didn't know how to treat it, infection and all, and they got rid of that. And also there were some differences in the interior of the bodies. So the Cro-Magnons, even today, because they don't have a frozen Cro-Magnon to look at, they say, oh, they're just early humans. But there were some differences, more differences than scientists and anthropologists know about.
So for everybody listening, this will not be Tom's first time on, and maybe the next time I interview him, and you can also go to his website, thegentlewaybook.com, and it'll be in the description. You can check out his books on there and also on Amazon. But I'm also going to try to get him in person, face to face soon. I'll try to get at least 5 to 10, some in a year usually. But go ahead, Tom.
Well, in another thing, keep in mind, everyone, that I do have a free weekly newsletter that's typically 10 or 12 pages every week, 52 weeks a year. And
where can people receive those? Just go to your website and enter the email.
Go to the website. On the opening page is a little box, and you just put your email address and name in there, and click on it, and then you'll get a little email saying, please confirm that you want it. And that's all you have to do.
Awesome. And I got your first email, so hopefully I'm in the system now. Your newsletter, you can give me that weekly.
I have not signed you up. I prefer that. I don't want to push my newsletter on anybody, and so just go to the first page and sign up.
Will do.
I sent you the sample of my latest newsletter just so
I liked it. I liked it though. A lot of tidbits in there.
Yeah.
So with I think we're doing pretty good time. So with Atlantis and Lemuria, so Atlantis and Lemuria, they were continents, or I guess they kind of
Yes.
had their own different civilizations. They were the two alpha civilizations, right? Back then,
Well,
the two.
yeah, the Atlanteans, keep in mind, they they the humans were created 60,000 years ago. Now, at that time, there were still um, beings that had been experiments of the ETs, and the Atlanteans, going all the way back to information from Edgar Casey, they were called things because they were gross and ugly looking, and the poor. But we ensouled them. That's got to keep that in mind because every being in this universe is ensouled. Insects, birds, animals, fish, you name it, all are ensouled. And keep that in mind on your dogs and cats. Be sweet to them, everybody. So they use them as slaves, and the poor things had a longer life than did humans. They were living like 150 years or more, and they had to, uh, uh, be in slavery for all that time until the Atlanteans finally fixed them. They their medical knowledge and everything is still beyond ours today. That's one of the things we haven't caught up with them yet is is medical treatments because they used a lot of lights and sounds and things like that to heal instead of invasive surgery. So
So so there's been a lot of talk over the years with different researchers and authors that I'm not sure about Atlantis. I know there's been different ET groups that genetically modified and created life there. You know, interbreeding and genetically modifying life there, genetic
mhm.
tampering, and also in Lemuria. But I know I've always heard with the one in Lemuria, it was the reptilians. So can you give a little bit of groundwork with who these characters are, these ETs are with Lemuria in contrast with Atlantis, Tom?
Okay. Well, okay. Now, gosh, where can I start? Um,
Like I
okay,
said, we're going to do our best within this 2 hour show, but I will get you back on, and maybe we'll go deeper dive, in some of this when we do our
yeah,
little face to face interview.
okay. So you brought up reptilians, and and reptilian souls make up 10% of the people having lives on Earth. But because they're veiled, they're under the same, if you are a bad guy in one life, on the next life, uh, somebody can be bad to you. It has to be balanced. All the lives, all those 600 to 800 lives on average that people have on Earth have to balance by the time you're through having lives on Earth to go back to your home planet. So um, the rep, this goes all the way back to the original Star Wars, and that's why I said, where do I start? There really was a Star Wars. Okay, it lasted. In our Star Wars movies, they kind of get a little bit of I think it's because they the people that write these stories, it was bleeding through from their past lives on their planets, and so the Star Wars actually lasted a tremendously long time.
They
27,
say they say George Lucas was and others were channeled a lot of this information.
yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. That's what I say. Um, and so it lasted 27,000 universal years. Okay. Now keep in mind the average ET lives about 14 or 1500 universal years. Um, the 27,000 universal years is actually 270,000 Earth years. So this war lasted a long, long time. And and um, uh, I was this amphibian, and it's my understanding I sort of reincarnate every time I have a life on Nomo, this water planet. I reincarnate as some sort of religious leader, and so um, in my meditations, Creator gave me the idea to suggest that to end the war because the war wasn't going good for this group of planets that eventually became the Federation of Planets, consisting of 20,000 planets now. But the war wasn't going good. The reptilians had more ships and it was terrible fighting. I mean, they would use a portal, show up in somebody's at somebody's planet or sun, and they wouldn't destroy just a planet like in the Star Wars movies. They would destroy the sun and all the planets orbiting that sun and killing billions of people. So I mean, this was a terrible, terrible war, and both sides did that. So, but it wasn't going very good, and so I was given the idea to pass along. Um, why not offer them to take part in the Earth experiment? And they were so hated for this war that had been going on thousands of
The
years.
reptilians were
Yeah,
hated.
uh, the the people fighting the reptilians. Okay, they so hated the reptilians that they rejected the idea. So it took another 450 universal years for them to finally say, and things were going even worse by then, to finally say, okay, we'll suggest it, thinking they wouldn't accept, but they did. And so that ended the Star Wars. They signed a peace agreement. They call this the Great War. They don't call it the Reptilian War, which is what I called it in the book. And as a diplomatic thing to,
Because if you would have said Great War, they would have thought here on Earth, and so you called it the Reptilian War instead.
it was called the Reptilian War because of all because the reptilians had tried to conquer our our galaxy, and so that sort of wrote my ticket, so to speak, for my lives on Earth. Everybody wanted to have a life with me being their advisor because they said, "Oh, this guy thinks outside the box," and I couldn't understand that. I said, anybody could have thought of this. No, nobody. You were the first. So now when I have lives on Earth, everybody wants me to be their advisor when they're like my wife in her next life is going to be a pharaoh 12,500 years ago in ancient Egypt, and I'm going to be her advisor. But that's a past life for me. Okay, so everybody wants me to be their advisor when they're leader of a country or the United States. That gets into a long discussion that we don't need to get into today. And so so uh, that's how that war ended. And and as I say, the now Atlantis, just to give you a timeline on Atlantis, Atlantis was settled with Adam and Eve humans 60,000 years ago. 30,000 years ago, um, uh, there was a line of volcanoes that bisected Atlantis out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And there were all these volcanoes, and they all erupted at one time. And most of the continent of Atlantis sank about 30,000 years ago. Okay. It took, if you can imagine, hundreds of years for the mud to finally sink from this whole continent, and it killed millions of people. Not only it killed millions of people in Atlantis, but because of the continent sinking, the oceans of the world raised 162 feet. I think it was 165, somewhere right there. And every single town, every single village, every single city around the world that was on the coast all went underwater. So that was the first major water event. That's why then the second major water event came 12,500 years ago, because by then the Atlanteans were fighting themselves from Poseidon, the size of Cuba, and Aaron and five little tiny islands below it. The sons of Belial were fighting the Law of One people, and so they had a Pearl Harbor attack where the sons of Belial people flew 300 aircraft up to Poseidon, 375 miles away, and using lasers started melting the ground and the people. 1.5 million people died the very first day of the war. Then the Poseidons retaliated to Aaron, and they started using lasers on them. So 12,500 years ago, all these islands in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean sank, and the oceans of the seas raised 40, 45 feet, I think, 45 feet. Again, and this was when the actual story of Noah actually took place, not 3,000 or so years ago, as in biblical texts, because they couldn't keep track of time. But it was 12,500 years ago, and most of the Mediterranean went underwater, but only 45 feet. So,
where is the conflict and when between Atlantis and Lemuria, or was there a conflict?
There was not, because Lemuria was off the coast of Japan, so it was all the way around the other side of the world, and Lemuria was people at the same time Atlantis was 60,000 years ago, with the Adam and Eve type, but different skin colors, the
prototypes.
Yeah, and and so for thousands of years, this was a very blissful place. I was told that I had over 165 or 70 lives on Atlantis, but only 65 on Lemuria. And when I asked why, I was told that because it was such a peaceful place, there wasn't the way growth, there weren't the challenges that you have when you're when you're in a more dynamic situation. The last thousand of years of Lemuria, that's when they started warring. There were 5 countries or so on the continent. The continent was about 12% larger than Australia is today, where Atlantis was 10% larger, and so they were divided just like Europe is today by rivers and mountains and things like that. That's how the countries were divided. And what's interesting is that Lemuria, the continent of Lemuria, came within 100 miles of Hawaii, and so for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the Lemurians vacationed there. And when they started having real problems, each of the countries had their own beach, and that's why people feel such a Lemurian connection when they're on Hawaii, is because of the thousands of years that the Lemurians vacationed there. And then 7,500 years ago, this is where I said, have I ever had a life on Lemuria? And I was told, oh, Tom, you helped sink the continent.
Hmm.
and I was a religious leader on Lemuria in one of the countries fighting, and I encouraged the leaders of the country to go ahead and use hydrogen type bombs on two of the other countries, thinking they didn't have a way to respond, but they did, and that's how the continent sank was the use of these hydrogen type bombs.
So we're going to continue a little bit more in Atlantis and Lemuria, and before we get into first contact and talk a
Mm-hmm.
little bit more about the Earth experiment, but while we're still on this Atlantis Lemuria, who I guess I should have already asked you this, but I didn't want to interject. Try not to interject too much.
Okay.
Who are you getting your downloads from, or is it a physical like altercation with a certain higher intelligence?
Sure. Okay. I actually go into a light alternative alternate state, put myself into this light state, and and then I first typically will ask to speak to Gaia. Um, and so I'll ask her lots of Earth and space questions, and then I will uh, typically switch over to Theo, who's my guardian angel, and and ask questions of Theo, and then finally I'll ask to speak to Antura, my soul brother, who's the ET and is an amphibian. That's they're in a he's in a mothership right now, hovering 50 miles above us. The mothership is 3 miles wide, 20 stories tall, the crew of 900, plus their families because they live there full time, their whole lives, uh, and that totals up 1,500 doing these millions of readings each day as part of the Earth experiment, looking at how negativity affects the Earth, humans, you name it. That's what they're really here for. And uh, what's interesting is that on the inside of the ship, um, uh, you may have read where somebody in one of these crash retrievals, some guy went inside this 30-foot wide spaceship. They were crash retrieving, and inside he said it looked like as big as a football field, and he got very disoriented. And I was told by Antura that in actuality that on the outside is the negative energy, on the inside is positive, the 10 positive energies. So it was actually 150 feet wide inside, not 300. And he says our ship basically on the inside is 15 miles wide. He said he calls it roomy.
Wow,
So,
interesting. So back to the human origins chapter, you have a subchapter about Adam and Eve. Uh, quote: Gaia does the term Adam and Eve refer to a specific couple, a class of beings, or what? Uh, Adam and Eve is a class of beings. There were Adam and Eves in each of the root races. You could say all over the world. Bear in mind that there were several groups of humans of the same race uh, deposited as different points on a continent, thereby ensuring that one or more of these clans, we shall call them, survived. Naturally, this took several thousand years. So to answer your question, there weren't two people named Adam and Eve. It only references the type of beings who the type of being who was finally settled on for Earth inhabitation. The Adam and Eve stories are allegories. And then goes on to say, did the Earth experiment begin with Adam and Eve or before? Before, you could say, it was agreed on several million Earth years ago, and then it went through many experiments to find the right body and mind to handle all the challenges. But the big kickoff or formal ribbon cutting did not occur until the introduction of Adam and Eve seedings. So you already talked a little bit about that, but is that still going on today? Are we still part of this experimentation from back then, during Atlantis or before Atlantis, whatever, in Lemuria? Is that still ongoing today? Is that why people are getting abducted, Tom?
Okay, they're not getting abducted today like they were before. The Zetas came to get DNA to form a hybrid race because they weren't able to ensoul anymore, and so they started abducting people, and approximately 25,000 people were abducted. Some people only once because their DNA did not match. Other people 100 times.
Do you want to help support Beyond Forbidden and receive extra content that's not seen anywhere else? By becoming a patron, a few things you will receive are the full-length 90-minute or 120-minute podcast episode. Members will also receive a private link of the video podcast and will only be exclusive to Patreon members. In-person, face-to-face interviews with some of the most well-known, respected researchers. Behind-the-scenes footage of interviews not seen anywhere else. And that's just a few perks. So what do you have to lose? Cut out one brain-rotting, overly processed Happy Meal a month that doesn't do anything beneficial for your mind, body, and spirit, and become a Patreon for just $5.